Of a British aid worker at the hands of ISIS terrorists will only strengthen the world's resolve to defeat the group. This is a vow from Prime Minister David Cameron. Alan Henning is the fourth Western hostage to be murdered by the terrorist group, and they are now threatening the life of another American aid worker, while Western leaders say they will not back down. The leader of coalition forces in Iraq warns we are in for a long fight. Christian Whiten is here. He is a former State Department senior advisor. Christian, what's your take, first of all, on those words, we are in for a long fight?
I think it's absolutely true. It's unfortunate because, frankly, you know, if you look at the post-Vietnam War era in the United States, it shows when our commander-in-chief, when our president has a strategy for victory, the American people will get behind him. But when there is nothing but prolonged conflict and no victory in sight, it's very hard to hold the American people and our allies abroad in a fight.
So as former State Department advisor, if you were in the position today to advise, what would you say?
You know, if it's worth fighting these people, then it's worth fighting them right and defeating them. You know, we don't even have a strategy from this White House to stop the beheadings. General Allen, who I have a great deal of respect for, is saying, you know, he's changed his verbiage from saying that we should destroy these people, ISIS, to degrade this force. And I assume he's taking that from the White House. But, you know, if you look at this, these airstrikes are not having an effect, at least not yet. ISIS still has the initiative in northwest Syria. They've pushed 160,000 refugees into Turkey in the last 10 days. They've moved into Abu Ghraib on the western approach to Baghdad. Soon we'll be able to shell Baghdad airport unless they're stopped, and they're contesting cities just to the north of Baghdad. So these people still have the initiative, and we don't have a plan for victory.
And Christian, you mentioned that if we were going to fight ISIS, then we should fight them the right way. What is the right way to fight them and defeat them?
I think we need to realize that Iraq as we know it, as a state, is gone. It's unfortunate because a lot of us predicted that when Iraq falls apart, you'd have tremendous violence. But when you realize that, you can realize we need to raise a Sunni army in both Iraq and in Syria to fight ISIS, which means we need some troops on the ground, unfortunately, not to do the most fighting, but to liaise with, support, provide intelligence, training, to backstop a Sunni army like the one we used in the insurgency, rather the counterinsurgency strategy George Bush ordered in 2007. So raise a proxy army to take land back from ISIS and hold land, but realize we have to give them a state as a result, so you're going to have 3 Iraqs.
Okay, so that plan is definitely being bandied about and in progress, as some from the administration would say, that there are troops there providing humanitarian effort, providing training, etc. So then where are the complications in your opinion?
Complications, I don't think, you know, we are still reliant on some sort of political reconciliation coming from Baghdad that will cause the Sunnis to put aside their grievances and really take the fight to ISIS. I don't think you have what's necessary for that. Remember, these Sunnis feel betrayed. We asked them to rise up, and they did rise up against al-Qaeda in Iraq as part of that 2007 surge. We moved them off of our payroll onto Malikis, who then basically betrayed them. So getting them once again to rise up, to stick their necks out, to fight these people who will kill you if you look at them the wrong way, is going to take more than words from President Obama or Secretary Kerry. You're going to need a ground presence. They're getting to know that they have some future and some real power and more than just promises. And I don't think you can get that with a few 100 or 1,000 American troops holed up at the Baghdad airport or in the Green Zone, or just by dropping bombs from overhead.
I want to ask more about that, but let me go to ISIS for a second here, Christian. So if ISIS is sending a message to Britain, to the U.S. and other international allies, what is that message, and how should the international coalition respond? Because that gets Americans and other humans right in the gut when they see these heinous crimes being committed.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the message is that they are undaunted. They're not afraid of Great Britain. Britain is a shadow of its former self militarily. I mean, it kills me to say that, but I think it's true. Britain doesn't have the power it had in 2003 or 1991 when it fought previously in the Middle East. And also, ISIS depends and has really made itself a magnet for jihadists around the world, not just in the Middle East, but from as far away as Indonesia. You hear about people and groups changing their allegiance from al-Qaeda to ISIS. So by saying that, listen, the Americans have come haven't fought us, and we remain undaunted, which is really what they're saying by these gruesome, disgusting killings. They are fulfilling a propaganda mission. I think it's unfortunate that they're succeeding, but in a way they are.
Yeah, but I mean, they're all about propaganda, right? I mean, and I want to know, because of course, you have military leaders saying the airstrikes against ISIS and its property, assets, they're working. I mean, so in your assessment, is ISIS perhaps feeling the heat on some level and they're just getting more desperate? Is that a possibility or no?
I wish that were true, and I hope it is, but again, just looking, if you were really feeling the pain, if this were really degrading your operational capability, would you really be on the offensive in Syria and in northern Iraq and in western Iraq? This just doesn't look to me like a military force that really is reeling. And aside from that, and that military tactical assessment is beyond my expertise, the political assessment that you're making, if you're Iran, if you're a politician in Iraq deciding whether really to try to reconcile with the Sunnis or whether to grab as much as you can when the getting is good, I think you have to look at this and say there's just no plan for victory. And also look at the West. I mean, we are a little bit impatient. And so, you know, the next president is going to inherit this. General Allen is conceding this is going to take a year. I think it's probably going to be something that drags on for several years. And, you know, the American people aren't great at being patient with Middle Eastern wars.
Well, I want to ask you before we go, why do you think the Turkish government seems to be reluctant to help the Kurdish fighters there on the border?
I think they're playing with fire. I mean, they do have a lot on their hands. They already had tens of thousands of refugees from the Syrian civil war, and they've added 160,000 in just the last 10 days. I mean, that's an enormous amount. But Turkey is playing a dangerous game of trying to be friends with some Islamists, but draw the line with others, and that's why they support groups like Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. So I think, as usual, Turkey will be one of the worst allies in the world. This is nothing new. This is a role they fulfilled going back to the 19th century, unfortunately.
It certainly is a complex situation, to say the least. Christian Whiten, thank you very much for sharing your expertise this afternoon. See you, Christian.
Thank you.